pork, and we're talking about not ribs, not pulled pork, but all those other wonderful cuts of pork, minus bacon. We'll get into bacon another class, but this one is all those other wonderful cuts. Pork and beef are the two big animals that you can break down and you can get all kinds of wonderful pieces. You don't just get a steak, you don't just get a tenderloin, you get all kinds of wonderful pieces. There's so many things you can get from a pork, not just the ribs and the butts. So that's kind of what we're going over this class is all the other cuts. So just going to give you a quick overview. We're going to talk pork tenderloin and pork loins, the differences between the two, how to prep and cook. And that's what we've got on the grill today, and that's what we're going to do munch on today. We're also going to talk about pork chops, country style ribs, pork steaks, talk about all those wonderful other cuts that there are in pork. So if there's any questions during this entire time, just give me a yell, I'll be happy to answer it for you. So let's start out with kind of a misnomer. A lot of folks, they think pork loin. Well, pork loin is just that one big piece of pork loin. And people go to the store and they'll grab the wrong piece. Sometimes they'll grab this big monster of a piece, and this is just a segment. This is just a 3-pound segment of a pork loin. Whole pork loin is usually about that long, usually weighs anywhere between 8 to 10 pounds. But that entire pork loin you can cut up and use multiple times, like use this one piece to smoke, use this one piece to slice in the pork chops, use this one piece for something else, or you can smoke the entire pork loin to serve a big crowd. But pork loin, we say just pork loin, people think sometimes that, but then people sometimes think of the tenderloin. Tenderloin is like the filet mignon of pork. It's very tender. I mean, you can see there's just very little marbling in there, so there's not much fat. A little bit, we'll talk about the silver skin, the fat here in a minute that you gotta remove. It's a wonderful cut of meat. You can grill it, you can slice it up in little fillets and grill those individually. They're great as an appetizer to put Sister Schubert rolls. Grill up one of those, put it on a Sister Schubert roll, serve it to folks at a party. You'll go through those in 2 minutes. So people will love them. So let's talk about this. So pork loin and tenderloin. The big difference between the two, the loin is of course the big loin itself. The tenderloin is usually attached, I don't have a big one, usually attached to the side. And when the butchering, they go ahead and detach all that part from each other. The tenderloin is a really nice piece. When you go to Kroger or Sam's or Costco, your package will look bigger than this one guy right here. They're usually packaged in twos. So if you see one that's about 2 to 3 pound pork tenderloin, usually getting 2 pieces. There's not much fat on the tenderloin compared to the actual loin itself. So there's not much trimming you have to do here. All you've got to do trimming wise is something called silver skin. And I'm going to just take some of this outside fat off first so you can kind of see the silver skin. Like the name implies, it's just a silvery connective tissue. That's what they call silver skin. You want to take that off. The reason you want to take that off, unlike fat and some of the connective tissues that will break down the smoking process, silver skin will not break down. They'll make a really tough piece that you got to sit there and gnaw on. So that will not break down like fat and connective tissues like coconut butt. That connective tissues will eventually render down and make it real tender so it falls apart. The silver skin will never do that. So what you want to do is take your knife. You don't need a big knife, just a small little knife like that. Just get up underneath the silver skin. Take your knife, point it upwards. Don't have to worry about cutting through. And gently just work it up, like so. And you'll pull the silver skin off without removing a ton of meat. You can go in here and take your knife and just kind of scrape along that way. The problem doing that is most of the time when you do that, you'll go too deep and you'll get the silver skin off, but you also come off a nice big chunk of meat that you're not going to be able to get back. And there's a lot of times you can save pork fat, you can save stuff to use in stocks. Can't use silver skin for anything. Most of the time you can reuse product used for something. Silver skin you really can't use. So most of the time on pork loin, tenderloin, it's just a small patch right here that you got to deal with.
So it doesn't cover the whole?
No. Now there's another little membrane that's on it, and I'll show you that here in a second. So that's right there is all the silver skin removed. Now there is a clear little membrane that sometimes you'll find on tenderloins. That's just connective tissue that will break down. So you don't have to really worry about that much. If you do see little pockets of fat like that right there, if you want to, trim it off, and you're good to go. You don't have to do that. I wouldn't worry about that much on a tenderloin. On a loin's a little different. Tenderloin, I wouldn't worry about that. So literally it took me 2 minutes to trim that. Very easy. Most of the times when it comes from the grocery store, all you got to remove is that silver skin right there. Now you got this piece of meat. What do you want to do with it? You can marinate it. You can rub and throw it on the grill. Most of the times you're going to direct grill this. Direct grill this just like a pork chop. Get beautiful sear marks on it. Cook it to about 140 degrees internal temperature. If you're scared, and it's about medium, if you really want to go higher, you can go to 160. The drawback is 160, you're going to have a dry piece of meat. 140, you're still going to have a cooked piece of meat that's not going to give you any issues, but it's about medium. But it's really juicy still. What we did today is we used the Memphis marinades, put a Ziploc bag, fill the marinade, which is nothing but dry powder, and we use this bag right here. The Memphis marinade, and just used water, mix this with water, and put the pork tenderloins in there and let them marinate overnight. The Memphis marinade basically is a wet marinade with all the water taken out, so we're not shipping water to us, so it's not as expensive. This one little bag, it's enough to do about 4 to 5 pounds of pork. So basically it was enough to do all the tenderloins we've got out there that's going to be cooking today. This big bottle right here, I call it big, but it's a normal size bottle. That's enough right there to do about 20 pounds of meat. So it goes a long way. You don't have to use that entire bottle. A little bit goes a long way. Another thing you can do for the tenderloin, take your knife, make little fillets. Make little fillets like that. If you want to wrap it in bacon, you can. I would not. I would just hit it with a little rub, sit there and grill it like a steak, pull it off, throw it on a bun, and you got a great little sandwich to munch on. So you can do that. Tenderloin's a great thing also. You can sit there, and if you've got folks coming over, you can cut it in strips like I'm doing right now. And grill these pieces like that up, or put it on a skewer. Have a little pork on a stick. Again, another little quick and simple appetizer. The meat's really tender. There's not a lot of connective tissue in there. You can see how the meat kind of pulls apart like that. So if you cook it like we talked about, it's about 140 degrees. Just basically grill it like you would a steak or a pork chop. It's wonderful for an appetizer, something to cook. And it's not that expensive. A pork tenderloin, usually anywhere between $2.99 and $3.50 a pound, but you're looking at a 2-pack right there, looking maybe 2.5 to 3 pounds of meat. So price point versus beef or anything else for a quick, easy appetizer is pretty good price point. Now let's talk about its bigger cousin, the pork loin. Pork loin has silver skin on it, but it also has this fat cap. Fat cap's not that big. It's not that thick as you see across the side cut right there. It's just a thin little fat cap. Fat is your friend. Fat helps keep that moisture in there and cooks it really nice. So what you want to do though, hard fat, and if you've been to our pork classes before, you've heard me talk about hard versus soft fat. Soft fat is a malleable fat that's going to render down. Hard fat is when you find a hard fat nodule. You want to take your knife and just trim that hard fat off. And all you do is just use your hands and just feel around, like right here is a strip right here, filling my hand of hard fat. So I'm just going to take the knife and just going to work my way down here. Not take off much, just a little bit. Take that off. Now you do have an option. If you don't want any fat on there whatsoever, you can go ahead and take your knife and trim that fat off if you're going to marinate or brine or inject. Injecting a piece of meat like this is a very thick, dense meat. Injecting a meat like this, you may get pockets of flavor in there instead of it all getting all the way through. Cut like this, you probably are better to brine it or marinate. Brining is simply a salt water solution that you sit in the bag and that salt water puts about 4 to 8% of extra water, extra moisture into the meat. We did not do that today. Today we just did a simple rub on these guys outside and sat there and grilled them. They're actually smoked them today. But stuff like this, brining it helps get the extra moisture in there. Well, if you make up your brine and put molasses in there, or put barbecue rub in there, something that you like, when it's imparting that water into the meat, it's also imparting a little bit of that flavor down deep into the meat. So that's an option to look at. So another thing you can do, go to Sam's or Costco, you're looking to try to save money. Most of these whole loins around here, anywhere from $1.49 to $1.99 per pound for a big 10-pound log. Well, if you want to save money and you love doing pork chops at the house, you just got yourself a center cut pork chop. You can sit there and you cut those wonderful pork chops up and make yourself 4 or 5 in a Ziploc bag or a vacuum sealer, throw in the freezer and freeze it, pull them out when you need to for the family, sit there and grill those and smoke them. So when I'm talking about pork chops, in your little thing right there, I think it's on the second page, the wonderful United States Department of Agriculture has decided to rename all of our cuts of meat. So that center cut pork chop that we've all used, or the second or first cut, they've changed all those names. Now you got the ribeye cuts, you've got the New York strip cuts. It's supposed to help all the grocery stores give a better idea of what customers a better idea of what they're getting. It's confusing as heck. In fact, if you go right now to Kroger, they've actually switched and kind of gone back to renaming it how they used to name it. But just keep an eye on, if you go into a Schnucks or a Kroger or Sam's or Costco, if you see a ribeye cut, pork loin, or a pork chop, it's basically like a bone-in ribeye. You've got the bone in there, pork loin sitting right there, sliced just like that. So just to give you an idea, if you go in there and you're like, what the heck is that? Now you know. So pork cut chops come in different sizes. You can get the little thin cuts, the thick cuts, the bone in, all those wonderful things. We've done everything from grill them to smoke them. What I like to do, about 1 inch, about that thickness right there, that's how I like my pork chops. Any thinner than that, you're literally looking at throwing it on there, flipping it, and pulling it off. Because if you leave it on there too long, you're gonna have a piece of rubber then that you gotta sit there and try to eat. You don't want it to get too dry and too rubbery on you. Internal temperature, again, somewhere around 140, but it's kind of hard to get an internal temperature of a pork chop. So what you want to take a look at once you've got it cooked is just slice a little portion on the side, open it up, and it's white all the way through. You don't see any pink striation through there. If you see a little pink, that's okay. Again, you're about medium or so, about 140 degrees. You may see a little bit of pink, but you really want to be straight white if you can all the way through, but still very moist. You may also see at Kroger and everywhere else butterfly pork chops. What butterfly pork chops are, it's a bigger pork chop like this, and they just kind of butterfly just like that. And the reason they're butterflying it is so you can do it even cook. And I kind of mentioned it in the flyer, so you get a nice thick pork chop. You've got a couple ways to cook it evenly. One way is to sear it on both sides and then pull it off to the side and let it smoke for a little bit off over indirect heat. So if you get a nice big thick pork chop, say about that thick, and you want to try to grill it directly, by the time the inside portion gets to where you want it to be, you're going to have a 1/2 inch on both sides. If you sat there and grilled on, it's either going to be blackened, or it's going to be tough, or it's going to be dried out. You're going to have this wonderful center portion. So what you want to do is sear it and then pull off the side indirect heat. The other option is to butterfly it like that right there and grill it. Also brings the effect of stuffing. I also like to stuff pork chops. I like to stuff chicken also. To stuff, all you need is just a pocket, like we did right here with the butterfly. Just want a pocket, that way you can stuff whatever flavors, be it feta cheese, mushrooms, bacon, anything you want to in there. The one thing to think about though when you're stuffing anything in here is raw meat on both sides of the stuffing you're putting in there. So you want to make sure your meat gets cooked all the way, but whatever you're putting in there, say if you're going to stuff this with hot Italian sausage, you don't want to really put raw hot Italian sausage in there. So by the time that hot Italian sausage gets cooked, you're probably looking at rubber on the outside. So go ahead and par cook any kind of sausage, turkey, anything you're going to stuff it with. Go ahead and par cook it all the way. Just kind of pan cook it or par cook it. Put it in there and then wrap it up and then smoke it. That way you get it done all the way through. Your stuffing is gone. You're not worried about getting anybody at your party sick or anything like that. So, any questions on stuffing?
How long would you smoke something like that?
Stuff like this, I'm going to smoke. Well, I'm going to sear it first. I'm going to sear it on the outside first. I'm going to sit there. I'm going to smoke it for about 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes. And what I'm going to be looking at is not just the outside color. I'm also going to be looking at the feel when I pick it up. If it's not stuffed, I'm going to be looking at how it feels. Also, I'm going to hit if it's this thick, I'm going to hit it with a thermometer and check the internal temperature. So how I did the butterfly, that's a pretty common way to do butterfly or stuffings. The other way to do it, get another big chop here. Take a small knife instead of the big knife. Just make a small pocket. Just make a small pocket. You can go deeper than that if you want to. How I did on the butterflies, I went ahead and loosened both sides. Probably going to have something like this if you're stuffing something loose like mushrooms and onions. They're going to fall out. So if you do a pocket like this, you've got a big enough piece. Just sit there with your knife. Don't cut your hand. And just make a pocket that goes almost all the way until about an inch or so to this side. Yes, sir.
What do you want those loins getting to out there?
The internal,
Yeah.
about 140.
You're over on both.
Okay. So that was the. Sorry, I got interrupted. Lost my train of thought. So stuffing. So do a small pocket like that. You can get a little bit of flavor in there, but whatever you're looking to do stuffing wise, make sure it's something bland. You may want to throw like feta cheese or Gouda mixed in with your mushrooms or like that. Something that has a punch to it. Something that when you sit there and bite into it, you get that wonderful pork flavor, your mushrooms and onions, or the jalapenos, or that feta cheese. You just get that little punch right there of flavor. So it's a great way, stuffing's a great way to get flavor into it. And buying a whole pork loin instead of just a small tenderloin, or buying the small chops at the store gives you the opportunity to do all this what we're talking about. You can sit there, you can play with that whole entire chop and sit there and play with that. Will, come on.
Waiting.
Yeah, check out, jump in there. Or somebody.
Thank you.
I apologize. So just briefly over pork tenderloins, loins, chops, and all that. That's just a quick synopsis of just that. Now there's other great cuts. One of my favorites, especially when I was a college student, was country style ribs. Country style ribs, cheap, great to cook, and you can add tons of flavor to it. Country style ribs are nothing but shoulder and the pork shank and pork loin area. They're taken and cut up into strips. So sometimes you'll have them bone in, sometimes you will have them boneless. And you can sit there and you can direct grill them. They'll be a little tough, but you can use a fork and knife and cut them. You can smoke them, so not totally falling off the bone, but you can smoke them where they're kind of a little more tender. You take a fork and kind of twist and pull it apart. Or the last thing you can do, what I like to do is smoke it, put it in a pan, put some barbecue sauce over it, about halfway through smoking it, and let it braise in that barbecue sauce. Pull it out and it just starts falling apart. You've got all that flavor that's gotten down in the meat. So, and they're cheap. Country style ribs, you can go to Kroger and go anywhere right now and get those pretty darn cheap country style ribs. And they're great little finger foods. They come about that big around, and you can be having a party. You can just have country style ribs out there to feed a big mass of folks. They're not great ribs, kind of misnomer, but they're great just finger foods of pork. Shoulder also, you can get pork steaks. Pork steak, similar to what we're talking here about pork chops and everything. If you notice in these guys, there's a little bit of clean. There's a little bit of marbling in there. You can kind of faintly see some of that fat. It's not connective tissue, it's fat in there. Pork steak, again, it's coming from the shoulder area. More connective tissue than fat. So the connective tissue there is going to be a little bit tougher. So instead of just directly grilling that, you don't want a really thick one. You want a really thin one. So that way you can grill it and then you can braise it if you want to. Again, to add more flavor to it. So there are other great cuts. I mean, from the whole hog. Anybody here has ever seen a whole hog cooked? Whole hog. I mean, you just go from the snout all the way to the leg. There's wonderful places on that. The cheeks on the whole hog. I never was kind of blown away. I went down to Memphis in May about 4 years ago, and we saw Brad and the guys from the shed. Walked up there and we were talking. He let me just have a little portion of the cheek. Just blown away. Mark Lambert, another friend of ours who also has a sauce up there, we got talking about just the weird cuts of meat. The neck bone of the pig is just a piece of meat a lot of butchers throw away. It's a lot of tender muscles up through there, a lot of wonderful things. This year at the NBN Invitational, they took tenderloin or whole loin like we had there. But they went ahead and when they butchered it, had loin, the rib meat with that for the ribs removed, all the way down to right here at the stomach area, but they had the skin on the outside. Rubbed it down and rolled it back up, threw it on the smoker, smoked it, pulled it off, chopped it up, threw a little bit of rub on the outside of it. The skin was almost like crackling. You can almost bite that. It's wonderful, but also got all that fat and flavor on the inside of it. So there's tons of ways. Don't think you can just take that rack of rib and that butt. There's tons of other ways to cook pork. There are so many different things. I mean, there's one piece we're talking about, pork loin, that you can get there and you just smoke it by itself. You can do that. You can make chops with it. What we're going to do here in a little bit, we've got 2 whole loins that we're just going to slice into thin slices, and they're great to put on a sandwich. They're also great to throw, like we talked about, little Sister Schubert rolls. Come football season here, if you want to entertain a group of folks with tailgating, smoke a whole loin, slice it thin, throw out some of those rolls and some of that, and let folks make their own little sandwich. It's really good. So, yeah, is he still working on the tenderloins?
Yeah.
Okay. So
These are just 150-ish.
okay. Got a little bit overdone. We're good.
Yeah, well, one of them 150, one of them should be right by 140.
Perfect.
That one's going to be your one that's higher up.
Perfect. There's a barbecue sauce and brush over there. If you want to grab me those on the back. So these 2 guys right here, we can clean up the mess real quick. We don't want cross-contamination. So these 2 guys have been out there on our Napoleon grill. Now, if you know me, I'm not a gas guy. I don't like gas grills. I'm always a charcoal grill guy. Napoleon, their grill has a charcoal plate that you can put into the gas grill. You turn it on, it fires up the charcoal, and you can turn it off, and that way you can turn it into a side-by-side charcoal gas grill. Sit there, you can sear a steak, or you can smoke like we did today. These 2 guys right here have been smoked in cherry and apple. And they smoked it, they're a little hot, but 140, 145 is when we want to pull these guys off. And they just hit it with sauce. Usually we hit it with sauce and put it back on and let it sear up, but we're just going to sauce it how it is. Let me see if I can take this one up to give you a good idea. See how that fat at the top, we're talking about that fat cap? It just reduced a little bit, pulled back. The ends are wonderful looking, not dark, there's just that red tint to it. I can smell it from here. It smells pretty it smells pretty darn good. Usually when you're doing a pork tenderloin or loin, and you're going to do something like we're doing here, you want to the last 5-10 minutes. Just take a sauce, not a heavy coat, just lightly coat the outside of it. Try to get every single place you can on it. And just let it coat, and then put it back on the grill for about 10 more minutes. And all you're doing is letting that sauce caramelize and set up, so you're not looking for 20,000 napkins to clean yourself with. Most of that's kind of set in there then. And you pull that off and let it sit. We're going to let it sit and rest here because it's gotten to the temperature we want it to be at. Let it here and sit and rest. While I'm doing this, does anybody have any questions so far? Hopefully I didn't go too fast.
You don't wrap those at all?
Don't like to wrap these. Now, if we were talking ribs or butts, yes, because that will help speed up the cooking process. somewhere around 140-ish, you're gonna hit a stall on a piece of large meat, be it a butt, be it a rack of ribs, something like that. So wrapping up in tinfoil will help speed up the cooking process. On this, I wouldn't wrap it. 2 reasons. Really looking at that 140-ish. Now, for some reason you hit a stall at 120 degrees and you're putting heat, you're putting smoke to it, and it's just not increasing at all, you may want to wrap it. But if you wrap it, there's wonderful bark that's on the outside that this barbecue rub made up, it's gonna get soggy. And if you get soggy like that, then you're just, it takes away from that crunchiness, that good flavor. And side note, the rub that we put on here today was Smoking Guns Hot. Now, don't be scared when I say hot. All it's got in there is a little black pepper and cayenne and salt. But we're using Blues Hog Original, which is a very sweet sauce. So you got that sweet and spicy. It's not gonna be too hot, but it's not gonna be too sweet. So it should combat those perfectly with each other. And as you can see here, the color of that is just beautiful. A lot of sauces, especially the thicker ketchup sauces, you'll get an unnaturally red tint, or the vinegar sauces, some of them will just be too thin and run right off. The Blues Hog, I think, has just the perfect, it's not too thick, it's not too thin. You sauce it on there, you get this beautiful color, it sticks to the meat, and it's sweet, but not too sweet and not too spicy. So, enough about talking about other people's products. I'm not here to sell products, but don't want to sell it all. So, like any other meats, you don't want to just pull it off the grill and sit there and start slicing that. Start slicing that, you're going to lose a lot of moisture. You want to let it sit there and rest for a good 5 to 10 minutes. Now, if you're busy, you're cooking other meats. Again, let's say you're having a party, and these get done fast. They get done an hour, hour and a half fast. Wrap it up in tinfoil. If your oven's off, put it in your oven. Just let it sit in your oven. Your oven will act like a hot box and keep it warm. If you can't do that, it's going to sound strange. Put it in your microwave. Microwave's an insulated box. Just make sure no one turns it on. But it's going to just stay in there and keep the moisture and keep warm. And then when it's time to serve, go ahead and pull it out and start slicing it up for folks in the slices. The smaller tenderloins, you've got to be careful with that. Those will dry out really quick. You kind of want to time those if we're having a party or something, almost too dead on. We could have cooked the tenderloins ahead of time before the class, but I was afraid if we did that, by the time we finished the class, we'd be chewing on rubber. So I wanted to make sure kind of we got those done on time, and as close as on time as we could get. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, that covers about everything. The only thing we did not cover was the belly. The belly where the bacon and all that wonderful flavor is. We're going to talk about that later in the year when it's a little bit cooler outside. We'll talk about brining and making your own bacon and playing with that wonderful belly. It's another cheap cut of meat that you can use and make your bacon, and you can add your own flavor to. One thing to warn you about that, if you're going to be doing bellies. It's a lot of time involved in that process. It's not something that you can easily do in 2 hours like this pork loin. We got knocked out in 2.5 hours. The belly's going to take you a while. You're going to invest a lot of time. It's great maybe do one time to show folks, hey, I made my own bacon. After that, you may want to go back to Kroger and get your bacon. But that's just something that's a personal thing. I like to make everything from scratch. I make my rubs and sauces from scratch, and I don't have any time anymore, but I used to have time on my hands that I would do that kind of stuff. So, but okay, thank y'all so much for coming. We're going to slice these up. The tenderloin should be ready here in a minute. I'm going to clean up all this mess so we don't get raw food with the clean fruit.
Probably about
5-7 minutes? Yeah, perfect timing. So if anybody's got any questions, I'll be here, Chris will be here, Will be here, and Mike is, we suckered him in here to volunteer to staying outside in the heat, so none of us had to. So thank him when y'all see him. Thank him for helping out today. So thank y'all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.